Foreign Minister, I'd like to ask what is Russia's view on the Brazilian-Chinese initiative of trying to foster a group of countries to discuss a peace process in Ukraine. The group last met in New York in September.
But a bit louder.
The group last met in September in New York, but ever since we've had an election in the United States, we are seeing an escalation in Ukraine with the decision of the U.S. to allow the use of long-range missiles to hit Russian territory. So under these circumstances, I'd like to ask what is Russia's views of this Brazilian-Chinese initiative. It still makes sense for both countries to pursue initiative in this sense. Thank you.
On the decision of the United States to allow Ukrainian regime to use missiles up to 300 kilometers long, we read what the New York Times published about this. There are still no confirmation either from the White House or from the Pentagon, but we basically take our position on the basis of what is going on physically. And physically, ATACMS, apparently not as long as 300 kilometers, are being used, including this early morning in Russia, against the Bryansk Oblast of Russia, which is bordering Ukraine. And we proceed from the understanding that this is happening, and that any modification of ATACMS cannot be used without American experts and instructors, including satellite data, including programming and targeting. The President mentioned this several times. If long-range missiles are going to be applied from Ukraine into Russian territory, it will also mean that they are operated by American experts, military experts. And we will be taking this as a qualitatively new phase of the Western war against Russia, and we'll react accordingly. As regards Trump's position on Ukraine, I cannot guess. He said that he is a president of peace, not the president of war. Politicians in particular, who declare that they prefer peace to war, deserve support, I think, in general. It's like Brazil and China, they want peace. And this intention we can only welcome. As regards the practical activities of this group of friends, it met only once in September, and the meeting was about announcing about the creation of this group. Now they are planning to convene the first meeting in November in New York. I talked to the Chinese minister yesterday. We would follow these activities. We would expect this group to take into account the initiative of Chairman Xi Jinping of February 2023. It was global security initiative, not about Ukraine, not about Palestine, generic approach to any conflict. And one of the key rules which was formulated in that global security initiative was, in any conflict, look first to the root causes and concentrate on eliminating those root causes. So I assume that since China is co-sponsor with Brazil of this group of friends, and since Chinese leader initiated this global security document, which insists on the need to remove the root causes of any conflict, that this would be applied to the Ukrainian initiative by China and Brazil. And the root causes, of course, the attempts to undermine security interests of Russia by pulling Ukraine into NATO and building NATO infrastructure just on our borders. And the second root cause, after the coup d'etat in 2014 in February, Next morning, after a deal was signed by the president, the then president and the opposition, they staged the coup, and Germany, France, and Poland, who guaranteed the deal, when we told them, you must stop this, gentlemen, they said, well, sometimes democracy takes unexpected twist. So they did support the coup. And since then, the regime which came to power in this illegitimate way passed series of laws starting from 2017, long before the special military operation became inevitable. Legislation exterminating legally any Russian education, any Russian media outlets, any Russian cultural presence in Ukraine, and recently they prohibited canonic Ukrainian Orthodox Church. And this is all against the demand of the UN Charter in Article 1 to respect human rights of all, irrespective of race, gender, language, or religion. So Article 1 of the Charter is grossly, rudely violated by the Kiev regime. And the West, which is concerned about human rights even when you discuss some biological diversity, they shut up about this particular situation, when the regime of their Russian, if you wish, is doing things which violate the key interests of each and every person. People who citizens of Ukraine, all of them are deprived, and all of them, most of them are much more comfortable in Russian than in any other language, and they are deprived of these rights. And when we draw attention of the West to these unacceptable violations, they don't respond at all. And Ursula von der Leyen, whom I mentioned too often today, she said that we must support Zelensky because he defends European values. If European values is racism, which is what is going on regarding the Russian culture and Russian people, then I'm not very optimistic about the future of such a Europe. So we hope that the Chinese-Brazilian initiative would be taken into account, because it mentions the need to implement the Charter and to be guided by the UN Charter. I discussed it with our friends, and I hope that when they are going to develop some roadmap, if they are planning this, that they will take into account the principles of the UN Charter in their entirety and interrelation, because otherwise it will be the Western position. The West takes from the Charter, when we discuss Ukraine, only one principle: territorial integrity. They forget about right of people for self-determination, and it is exactly this principle, respect for right for self-determination, which was the legal basis for decolonization. In fact, colonial rulers did not represent the people they ruled. They exploited them and exploited the natural resources of the lands on which these people live. And the people decided that you're not my boss. We want to be independent, and we want to have rulers who would be acceptable to us. Something like this is happening in Ukraine, because the regime cannot represent the people whose language, cultural, access to information, religious rights, they exterminated by law. And the same attitude we see. I think there is some similarity between decolonization and what the people of East and West, East and South of Ukraine, Donbass and Novorossiya, what they feel about Kiev regime. They do not accept legality of this regime. And the regime is anti-Russian. Russian meaning also citizens of Ukraine. When Zelensky, before the special operation in 2021, when the Minsk agreements were still alive, but Ukraine was fighting against the line of contact, and when he was asked in an interview by some Western correspondent what he thought about the people of Donbass on the other side of the line of contact, Zelensky said, "You call them people. There are people and there are species." That's what he said. The previous, the gentleman who was once prime minister of this putschist government after the coup, he was calling the people who rejected the coup subhumans, and so on and so forth. And they publicly were bragging that they will eliminate Russians legally and physically. This is the quotation from the representative of the office of Zelensky. So like in colonial rule, the Kiev regime does not represent huge portion of the people which it used to consider as citizens of Ukraine and who decided at a referenda to come back to the Russian Federation. Yes, and speaking of Chinese-Brazilian initiative, we were slightly surprised when we learned that France and Switzerland were invited to be present as observers. France, as we just discovered, is not discovered, reiterated once again, is in the lead of the war through Ukraine against the Russian Federation, and Switzerland is not neutral for a long time. It is not very, I think, logical and promising that, yes, we were told by our Chinese and Brazilian friends that they would be just observing without the right to speak, but they would be part of the process in any way. So we raise these concerns, and we don't think it is necessary for the purpose of uniting global South to promote the peace in Ukraine.